everyone, Kim here. This is the very first of my series called For Freight Sakes, and it is the start of a passion project that I've been threatening to do for ages. Um, so I have been in freight and logistics for going on 26 years now, and I've found that there are so many people who have landed in freight and logistics or are starting a business importing or exporting, and there's so many resources out there that you can utilize for free, but it becomes a little overwhelming. So the purpose of these videos is to get it from somebody who's been in the industry to sort of debug and de-jargonize the industry to a certain extent and just give you some ways to start. Just a basic, I'm going to keep them short and punchy, explaining points that get raised, and this needs to be interactive. So I ask you to please reach out to me. I will include my email address in the description below, but you're also welcome to put something in comments should you need to. And let's just debug it and get down to the basics of it. Let's work together. I am challenging myself to a video a day for the next 21 days. So there should be lots of information and resources for you to get to. And without further ado, let's jump into our first one. So here we go. Let's see if we can get this up and running. Okay, so for freight sakes, I'm going to start on those who are looking to import or export to or from South Africa. If you already are, there may be points in here that get raised that'll be to your benefit as well. So please don't ignore the presentation. It's going to be short and to the point. My experience is South African, so although freight is a global industry and a global there's global information and a lot of it will be valid in other countries. My focus is for South Africans. So please be sure to check with somebody in your country or reach out if you want me to put you in contact with somebody in your country. So focus on South Africa. The points that we're going to cover are certification that you will or won't need, different modes of transport, HS codes and tariff headings. I see I've repeated myself there, but it's because it's that important. Any restrictions or inspections that may take place, what your duties and taxes are, something called Incoterms, which if you haven't heard about them are incredibly important. And then last but not least, what are your payment terms? How does this whole business work? So jumping straight in, what mode of transport is best for you? So, there's terminology: courier, air freight, sea freight can be a less than container load or an LCL, a full container load or a full an FCL, and who knows, in the future it could possibly be via drone. So my focus is on international freight. I'm not going to discuss domestic freight, although I have had about 8 years experience working in that sector. So that's something that we can certainly discuss in another video. But when it comes to international freight, it really works on weight breaks and as well as the value of your cargo, the nature of the cargo that you're looking to move, the size of your orders, that type of thing. So if you're selling something in South Africa and you've got small orders that are going to be going to directly to client and they're under 50 kilograms, you're going to want to courier it. Air freight is just too expensive. The minimum charges are just not viable. Sea freight's going to take you too long. It's going to be even more expensive. So if it's smaller parcels, if you're importing samples that you want to check, courier is your way to go. Anywhere over around 50 to 75 kilograms. And when I talk weights, I'm talking chargeable mass. So please remember that anything that moves has a volumetric mass, or the amount of space that it takes up. That is calculated through the airlines and the shipping lines in conjunction with the product's actual weight in order to get you a chargeable weight. And so once your chargeable weight is hitting 50 to 75 kilograms, air freight's going to be your better option. That it makes more sense, unless of course your product is not able to fly for various reasons, be it hazardous or just the nature of the cargo. It's a little bit more, it's generally more, it moves more quickly. So you're looking at, on average, 5 to 7 days for an air freight shipment. Bigger transshipment airports can get you overnight or 1 to 3 days. It really just depends on where it's moving. So if you have any specifics, as I said, just reach out. When we get to sea freight, on average, into and out of South Africa, you're looking at 6 to 8 weeks if it's coming from the Americas, around 4 weeks from Europe, and then depending on any delays, 4 to 6 weeks from the Far East. But again, really, really just depends. So you'll see two terms there, LCL and FCL. FCL is a full container load. So that's if you're moving a 20 or 40-foot containers worth of cargo. Whether it's all from one supplier or it's a consolidation, those are things that we can certainly look at and discuss. And LCL stands for less than container load. So this is where your cargo doesn't fill a container and you'd rather ship it in a consolidation with other people's cargo. Keeping in mind, this is generally not viable for hazardous cargo. It's possible, but not often viable. And the easier it is for your cargo to pack with other people's cargo would make it easier to move as an LCL. So if you can't pack anything on top of your cargo, then keep in mind that the consolidators need to charge you for that space above. That'll also happen with air freight. So we would look at that type of thing. If you are half filling a container, sometimes it's more viable to send it as a full container, even though it's only half full. So we'd look at that type of thing. And some consolidators only ship 20-foot containers from some ports. So if your cargo is longer than about 5.8 meters, it's not going to fit in a 6-meter container. So that's another aspect that we need to look at. So these are things that you need to take into consideration when looking to start your import-export business, is the mode of transport and what your landed cost per unit or per kilogram or as a percentage of the value would be based on the different modes. So for example, if you're looking to start a business and you're initially only going to bring in one pallet or 2 boxes of a product, your cost per unit is going to be far higher if you're air freighting or couriering it than when you get to the scale of bringing in container loads. So it may be worthwhile doing a costing exercise on both to see if I bring in 2 boxes air freight versus 2 pallets LCL versus 20 pallets FCL in order to calculate my landed cost per unit. But yeah, as I said, reach out and I'll happily help with that. All right, so if you are looking to import and export, you potentially will need to be registered as an import and export company. Initially, if you're just bringing in a few samples or you want to try something out, you can import up to 50,000 Rand per shipment, up to 3 times a year without an import certificate. Once we're going over that value or over that volume, it is advisable to apply for an import certificate, and you can do that in your personal capacity. You don't have to have a registered business, but obviously if you are looking to start a business, then it's worthwhile getting it done in your business's name, and it can also be changed. So if you initially apply because you want to get some samples in and they're exceeding a value or exceeding the number of times, apply in your personal capacity, and then at a later stage register your business, you can always apply in your business name. It's not an overly expensive exercise, and you can do it directly with SARS. The website is included below, so you can go ahead and have a look, see there, and you can apply. However, it can be quite a time-consuming exercise to apply, and to make sure that all of your attachments are there and that they meet all of SARS's requirements to prevent back and forth with SARS. I personally recommend that you reach out to a professional organization to do this. There are several available. I have a friend who owns a company in Port Elizabeth called the Customs Hub. I have often recommended clients of mine to him. And Graham and his team are absolutely amazing. They're able to get documents out incredibly quickly. They save you a lot of time and hassle because they do double check everything prior to submitting to SARS. So yeah, if you were interested, give me a shout and I can pass on your contact information to them, or I can pass their information to you, and you can get them registered. I could do it through myself or through the company that I work through now, but it just means adding unnecessary markups on. So I'm quite happy for you to work with them directly. And yeah, keep me a copy. I will happily assist in any of that. And lastly, if you are applying by yourselves, or I'm sure Graham and his team will tell you the same thing, when applying, Even if your business is only planning to export or import, I recommend that you do both applications at the same time. It's filling in one extra form. Is no additional charge, and it's just should you ever should you have an import business and you suddenly decide you want to start selling in Botswana, you've got to reapply for your export and you're going through the whole exercise again. And there would be a charge then if you were getting professional assistance. So rather just apply for both at the same time. It makes more sense. Okay, so something that you will hear about when you start importing or exporting is an HS code or a tariff heading. Now, you as the importer or exporter are held accountable by customs for the HS codes that you use. So although you may be able to get some advice and online resources or speak to your friend in freight to get advice on what HS code you think you should be going for, it is something that customs will hold you as the importer or exporter on record accountable for. The HS code used by the exporter and importer need to match at least the first 6 digits, which are globally recognizable. Thereafter, it becomes more country specific. So, don't worry if the digits thereafter don't match exactly, but make sure that you're comfortable that you're using the best tariff heading to best meet your product. So if you're looking to import something, please ask your supplier for their HS code if they are already exporting globally. If you're unsure, try online resources. I've often found that a simple Google search to say what is the HS code for and give a product description. It may pop up with 2 or 3 different options. And then in South Africa, there's a wonderful resource available with freightnews.co.za. If you click on the customs tab, the website is listed in the presentation here. So if you just go onto that, click on the customs tab, and then you can search through their customs option. If you are bringing in something that you don't believe has been imported before, or you think that the tariff heading that has been given is not quite correct, or you're very, very uncertain on tariff headings, then absolutely there are organizations, Customs Hub do it, that can assist with a tariff determination. I've had it done with a client when recycling packaging became, when recycling of disposable packaging for fast food places, alternatives to polystyrene started coming into the country, we did a tariff determination for it because it wasn't something that had been listed previously and there needed to be clarification on it. It's not polystyrene. So is there something else that can be utilized? And understanding how those HS codes impact on every aspect of your freight is also very important. So if you're unsure, please reach out to your freight forwarder or your friend in freight, and you're certainly happy to have a conversation. But please, please, please make sure that you, as the importer or exporter on record, are comfortable with the HS code that you are using. You understand what it means and says, and because ultimately customs will hold you accountable. And make sure that your freight forwarder or customs clearing agent is using the correct tariff heading. So this leads nicely into duties and taxes, and this is obviously applicable for imports. Your HS code is what is used when we do a customs entry to determine what duties, if any, will be applicable and how they're calculated. It also helps determine any benefits from global trade agreements, including European trade agreements, a SADC trade agreement, and well, we're not benefiting from American trade agreements at the moment, but should any others pop up, it does give you the benefits of understanding where your duties or taxes would be. The image I've included in this presentation is just an example of what can be found on Freight News, which will tell you, what the actual heading is, what the description is, and then what your general duties, EU duties, etc. are, and the unit per duty. So sometimes a product is charged per kilogram. So often it's at a percentage of the value of the goods. It could be per liter. Some alcoholic beverages that are imported are charged per. The excise duty is based on the alcohol liters. So if it's 10% and you're bringing in 10 liters, then 1 liter would be alcohol. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot to go through and unpack and understand there. And if you're bringing in something that is very generalized and you're comfortable that what you've researched and what you found is workable and what the supplier is telling you makes sense to you, absolutely go for it. If you aren't comfortable, definitely reach out for advice. If SARS find that you have been importing something and it doesn't meet the necessary requirements, they can go back 5 years and penalize you. So definitely make sure that you're comfortable with what you're doing. Also, if you've been importing something and it's cleared and it's come through perfectly 5, 6, 7 times, please keep in mind that SARS cannot physically inspect every single shipment and go through absolutely everything, particularly when something is couriered. Your bulk custom entries are done. So if there is a restriction, it may come through on a courier that it doesn't come through necessarily when it's air freighted or sea freighted. And that's because of bulk clearances. But be aware that should SARS stop anything, they can go back in time. So make sure that you are using the correct HS codes. It is fraud if you're not. Also check if there's any restrictions on your goods, if there are any import permits required, export permits required, and that can all be done through the link that I've included here, the prohibited, restricted, and counterfeit goods link. Just note briefly, anything that goes into or onto a human body is going to require permits and inspections. Anything that is a food product or an animal product or a plant product is going to require inspections and likely permits. Anything that plugs into a wall will likely require ITAC permits to make sure that it's meeting the necessary requirements. Something that's going to be going for resale where it where there are specifics in order to meet consumer requirements could very well fall under permits. And lastly, anything secondhand will definitely require permits. This also excludes other things that you may require, like fumigation on your product. So be sure that you are fully understanding these aspects. And then with regards to duties and taxes and tariff headings, there are ways of looking at things that can potentially benefit or disadvantage you. So going back to my client that does the packaging, they were importing paper cups for coffee, your coffee cups, the disposable coffee cups with the little plastic lids. And when you bring in a cup with a lid, because it's 1 unit, if it is 1 unit, then it comes in under one particular tariff heading. But should you be bringing in the cups from one person and the lids from somebody else, they're two separate items, and that requires a different tariff heading. So it is really important that you understand this. All right, and again, feel free to reach out. Now, moving on, you will notice or hear of terminology, things like Ex-Works, FOB, DAP, and all of this is referring to Incoterms. Incoterms are international commercial terms, and it's agreed upon between yourself and your supplier or your buyer. And although your freight forwarder clearing agent can give you their opinions on something, ultimately the risk and responsibility is completely yours. This is something that I'm going to delve deeper into in another video, but I just want to make you aware that the fact that they do exist and that they are negotiable and that they really are between yourself and your supplier. And why do you care? I mean, if the supplier says to you, I'm going to ship it on these terms and this is what you pay, what difference does it make to you? Like, just agree with them or disagree with them? Absolutely not. It can really impact you and your business quite heavily. So knowing and understanding your risk and responsibility, knowing where they're responsible and where you are responsible is vitally important. So that you can be prepared, so that you can understand, should you insure, or is it fully covered by your supplier? If they are insuring it, will it cover if the vessel sinks, if the airplane, if there's a fire on board an airplane, or horrible things that we hate to think about? This is high value cargo to you, and it can have very definite impacts on your business. So understanding where your risk and responsibility starts, be it an importer or an exporter, this is vital. Understanding where the benefit of choice with regard to the mode of transport or the service provider used. So very often, I'll use a China import as an example. Very often, China suppliers, completely making sense, will go with the cheapest possible shipping line option or airline option to keep the cost of your product lower, which is great. That's what you want, right? But what if there was an option that was marginally more that got you your cargo 2, 3 weeks sooner? What is the impact on you and your business in that regard? Your supplier is not going to take the time to shop around and find different freight agents. They're busy. Their focus is on the product. That's where your freight forwarder can come in. So that's where your freight forwarder can benefit you. But it really depends on the product, on the mode of transport, on your relationships with your suppliers. So particularly hazardous cargo, sometimes it's best that the supplier actually pay the freight. Particularly dangerous cargo, again, suppliers have put together agreements with service providers for that particular product, and they're big suppliers. So yeah, let them handle it. However, if you are starting a small business and you're going to be bringing in 2 pallets on an LCL shipment, and this is why I've highlighted at the bottom here. Again, I will go into Incoterms in another video, but this point to me is vitally important. Many people in the industry are aware of, but those who are importing and exporting, not necessarily so. So when you move cargo in a less than container load shipment, then it goes through a consolidation company. So the supplier in China or Pakistan or wherever in the world it is delivers the cargo to the consolidators, and the consolidators pack it into a container, which then moves to South Africa, and it gets unpacked in a licensed depot. And it's important that you understand that it has to go through a licensed depot. So there are only a few companies in South Africa that are licensed to unpack, and then it'll come through to you. Now, with that licensed depot unpack, in order to get the business, these licensed depots have agreements with the consolidators overseas. And what that agreement says is, if you give me the business, I will give you X amount back for every container that you send my way. And they need to recover that cost. And so when unpacking the container, they incorporate that recovery cost into the unpack charges, and you as an importer will pay significantly higher unpack charges for your cargo to be released from that container. So you may get freight included or a really great freight rate on your LCL cargo coming from wherever it is in the world. Please do yourselves a favor. Check with a freight forwarder. You've got a friend in freight, you can check with me what the cost would have been had you shipped on a FOB basis or ex-works basis or a different Incoterm where you're paying the freight. Although the freight cost may be higher, the savings on your unpack charges are so significant that very often your landed cost, so the cost of the product at your door, including freight, is so much lower. And it's unfortunately something that I've come across since starting in this industry time and time again. It happens all the time. Please be very aware of this. Reach out, get help. Do not import LCL shipments on a CFR CIF basis. If you do feel that your supplier is insisting on paying the freight and they've got such wonderful freight, that's great. So be it. Let them do that, but then do it on a DAP or a DDP basis so that they cover the unpack charges. So they take the knock on any of those exorbitant charges should there be any. Yeah, so that's just a vital point. And please keep it in mind. But again, I will get into Incoterms further in another video. And then lastly, before we wrap things up, it's something that most people don't consider. They just go, oh yeah, I've got a freight forwarder and I pay my freight forwarder cash. You know, that's what they've asked for. That's how I started. That's the way I do it. or they gave me a 30-day payment term and that's what I do, or whatever it is. Understanding payment terms with your freight forwarder can have an impact on your business. So especially while you're new and you're starting, you're probably going to work on a COD basis. And then with the thought process that once I get bigger, because cash flow is king. I mean, you used to say cash was king, but nowadays cash flow really, really is king in a business. So understanding the impact of your payment terms with your freight forwarder and your cash flow. So, and your payment terms with your supplier. Now, if your supplier is including freight on their invoice and payment terms with your supplier are, 50% upfront and then the remainder when it's on shipped on board date, which is very common, you're paying your freight then. And you've still got to wait 4 to 6 weeks for your cargo to get you. So often the Incoterm can affect your cash flow. If, however, your payment terms with your supplier are FOB, or Incoterms are FOB, you're only paying your freight when your cargo gets here, based on your payment terms with your freight forwarder. You can also possibly defer your VAT and duty payments, but keeping in mind that any time somebody else pays something on your behalf, especially your freight forwarder, so if they're paying your freight and your VAT and your duties on your behalf, and they're offering you 30-day payment terms, there will be a disbursement facility, it can be called, or a facility fee, or built into the agency fee, a charge for them to outlay this money on your behalf. And they're not going to outlay it at a cost that costs them. So they're going to go and borrow the money from a bank or a financing house, outlay the funds, and then invoice you whatever they've paid, plus their interest rates, plus a markup. So your freight forwarder becomes a very, very, very expensive bank. The benefits of having a 7-day or a COD facility with your freight forwarder means that negates any of those fees. So any disbursement fees, facility fees, etc., which helps you bring down the landed cost of your product. It also helps your freight forwarder. They don't like having these huge facilities that they need to be able to provide because they have to pay the airlines, the shipping lines, and everybody up front. There's no more account facilities with shipping lines unless you're doing hundreds of thousands of containers, in which case you may be working with a freight forwarder that is a huge conglomerate globally, and they don't necessarily look at your particular requirements. So I'm just mentioning that it's important to understand your cash flow. It's important to understand who do you need to pay when. You may hear of things like, oh no, my business has its own SARS deferment. And it's definitely where South African Revenue Services is looking to go in the future. It's very much where global companies and businesses are at outside of South Africa. And that is that they have their own facility that they pay their customs, VAT and duties directly to their revenue services. So a lot of the blue chip companies in South Africa have their own SARS deferment facilities. They don't use a freight forwarder or a clearing agent to pay their VAT and duties. It works better for them and it helps them offset, with their VAT payments and et cetera, et cetera. So it is something that is possible, but starting out, it's really not going to be of any benefits to you. You don't have your own clearing department. So until SARS is at the point where it's working with small to medium companies on that, right now, use a clearing agent to do your SARS payment. But should you use your freight forwarder as a bank? So should you be going with a 30 days from statement account facility, which is the industry norm in South Africa, it's costing you money. It's costing you a lot of money. And you'll probably find that your accounts department will prefer that because it's easier for them to make one payment as opposed to a payment for every single shipment. But look at the cost. It may be viable. It may help you with your cash flow, but yeah, I have yet to see, particularly for a small to medium company, where that is beneficial. So just making you aware of it, and hoping that answers a lot of our questions. I hope I've opened your eyes to a few things. please, please, please reach out, ask questions, and I look forward to our next video tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.